have those goals and intentions in mind. And so these are our goals today. And the thought is, if we could do these goals, if we can come out and say, I know the answers to all of these 4 learning intentions, then I'm going to be able to, when I go back to my campus, have those rich conversations that are going to affect my instructional practices, which are going to affect my students' scores. So the first thing we're going to look at today when we're talking about using real-time data to guide our PLC conversations is, where do you get the data? And so we'll cover that quickly. Then we're going to look at what types of data to use. And after we look at where you get the data and what types of data we have, we're going to stop and do some reflection. And then we're going to get into this, how do you talk about that data? And then once you're talking about that data, how does that data actually guide your PLC work? So this is one of my favorite pictures to use. And I'm thinking about this picture and I'm looking at the lens of the fact that I have varied learners in this classroom. And good teachers know that the best teaching practices are based on what they know about their students. And so when you think about you're in your classroom and what you know about your students, how do you learn about them? Like, what do you use to learn about your students? Just to remind you, I'm being videotaped. Yes, Charla.
Conversations with them.
Absolutely. You get to know them through conversations. You get to know them through assessments, through learning profiles, and things like that. Unfortunately, I don't get to assess you. I did have some conversations with you. And today I'm going to ask you that you look through this PLC process through your lens. If you think about where you're at in the continuum, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being you're brand new to PLCs, 10 being I could be up here and teaching it, where are you at with your being familiar with PLC and the PLC process? A scale of 1 to 10. I got a 9, I got a 9, a 7, a 6, a 4, a 5. Okay, so we all have very different lenses. So as I'm going through this material, please look at it through your lens. If you're up that 4, then today just take it in. Remember, it takes 7 touches to really become familiar with materials. So if today you can answer those 4 learning intention questions, you're good to go. If you're those 9 or 10s, then I'm going to ask you that you look at it through this lens. That you're saying, oh, what new information am I getting today? And then also maybe I'm stretching you and say, like, how is that different than what I'm doing, and what can I take back on our campus? So let's look at where we get that data. And I love this picture right here. I created it myself, and I'm kidding you with I love it, but it talks about this, the Teacher Clarity book. And I'm thinking that you guys are already familiar with Teacher Clarity because you're not one of the 300 people that signed up for that PD. You're in here with us today. And so when you get the data, here's where we get our data on our campus. It stems from that Teacher Clarity. And the first thing that we do is we look at those learning progressions. So if you look at Teacher Clarity, you get those learning progressions. But on our campus, we do something a little bit different, and we actually call them learning targets. And so we take all of the learning progressions that we've gotten from the standard, and we put them into a learning target. And right there, box number 3 is question number 1. What do we want our students to know? That's mastery for us. So if you can think about all of those learning progressions, they're all right here, and we're right here, question number 1, what do we want our students to know? So then you're thinking, well, what's that last box for? Well, that last box is for question number 4, what do we do when our students already have it? So we've broken down the standard into learning progressions, and we're talking about those conversations. And then, with Teacher Clarity, the learning progressions are really those big ideas.
Diaz, please meet your ride in the visitors parking lot.
Diaz?
Eliana Diaz.
Diaz, anybody?
In the visitors parking lot.
Nobody in this room. And then when you think about those learning progressions, if you get into Teacher Clarity, then you break those down into your learning intentions. And those learning intentions are what you teach every single day. And we know when you're admin, we've got 2 admin in the room right now, when the admin come in the room and they say, you just taught a 45-minute lesson or a 60-minute lesson, how do you know that your students got it? You're going to assess them. And with Teacher Clarity, you're looking at that success criteria. And right there is where we get our data when we're looking at PLCs. So when we're talking about the data that's guiding our PLC conversation, it comes right from here, our success criteria. So that's where we get the data. So now let's look at what types of data we use. If anybody would like her signature, you notice that hissing lady is right there, and she's actually on our PLC team. And this is what our PLC does. Our really good PLC teams say we PLC every single day, and that is absolutely true. They're PLCing during their preps on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday is just a more formal prep, or as Dr. Gilbert said, we actually PLC on Thursdays. But what we know with our great district is they provided Fridays for us to do PLCs. And sometimes when we teach a standard, it may have started on Wednesday for us, or maybe Tuesday, or maybe Thursday. But we still want to have that rich data to talk about. So some types of data that we use are just those anecdotal notes. And so this is actually one of our team's learning progressions. This is their CFA 1. And here's what they did. They were looking at this standard and they said, I just need to know right now if these kids can define explicit, implicit, or an inference. And they had the kids named and they just used it as a checklist. And they just went through as they were teaching that and just were able to determine if they could do it or not do it. And that's the data that they brought to the PLC that week. It wasn't anything formal, it was just anecdotal notes that they talked about. And what this team realized at this point was that their kids could define implicit, they could define explicit, but they sometimes just got it mixed up. So they knew the definition, but they really didn't have it, grounded in the terms. And so they made a plan for that. The other types of data that we use on our campus, and again, that was created by them, are some more formal CFAs. And so this is a more formal CFA that they used, and it's fresh and it's relevant. And that's what's really important for our campus is when we're looking at this data right here, we need to make sure that if we're PLCing on Friday, that we're not talking about an assessment that we gave on Monday, because this stuff is guiding our instruction throughout the week. And so it has to be fresh and it has to be relevant. And so this is another CFA that they might give, and this one gives, to me, a little bit more rich information. So if you're thinking about why would I think this one's a little bit richer, what are your thoughts on why would this CFA give us more data than the last one?
Because it involves comprehension and thinking and fully understanding it.
Absolutely. So they're going to be comprehending the text, they're going to be reading the text. What else data might you get from that? Lindsay?
It helps justify their knowledge of implicit and explicit in several examples, so you can really see what they identify.
Agreed. Several examples where they're going to have to justify their knowledge with that. I love tests where kids are marking it up, because I can really see if kids are underlining textual evidence, if they're, listing, like they might say it's not explicit and why. So this can give us a little bit more richer data. But this is another type of data that we would use during our PLC process. And then the last one are those CSAs. And when we get to our CSAs, it should be no surprise to our team, because here's literally what they've done. When our team gives a CFA, if the kids don't have it, then we're going to talk a little bit. Remember that fourth thing, how to guide our work, what are they doing in between that? But by the time they get to the CSA, they know who's got it and not, and it should be a majority of their kids. So when we're looking at guiding using real-time data to guide our rich conversations, we looked at two things. We looked at where you get that data and what types of data. So will you take a minute just in your note catchers to do some reflection on some of the new learning that you have? Maybe think about the types of data you've used and the types of data that we've used and where we get that. President, because your face is up there. Like, we love your room. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. I got 1,138 write-in votes.
You did.
Did you win?
For president?
No,
No.
Biden won.
That's Biden's back there.
Yeah, no, it's Trump. I mean, that's a lot.
Oh, yeah, that is Obama. Thank you. What
Yeah.
was I saying?
You said it, but
I just said Biden. Yeah.
who said John Wayne is folded up. I gotta get him retaped, and Ronald Reagan I have to get retaped.
We're gonna do something that's called stand up, hand up, pair up, and we're gonna do that for no worries for a teach to learn. So in just a minute, I'm gonna ask you to stand up, You're gonna put your hand up and you're gonna pair up with somebody. And the person who has the longest hair is gonna start first. So stand up, hand up, pair up. The person with the longest hair is gonna start first. Once you pair up, I will tell you what your conversations are gonna be. Dr. Gilbert, are you gonna be a partner with Ms. Wyman?
Yes, I am.
Then we do have an uneven pair, so we're gonna have a trio. So somebody's gonna be a trio. So go ahead and stand up, hand up, pair up. You guys are so like excited and motivated. When you stand up, it should be somebody not at your table, but next time I'll have you guys move. Yeah, perfect, thank you. All right, the person with the longest hair, will you please tell your partner where you should get your data that drives your PLC conversation? The person with the shorter hair is going to talk about what types of data you can use to guide your PLC conversations, and then just share what you do with on your campus. If you would finish up your conversations and thank your partner for making you smarter. To all conversations, but I'm wondering if your conversation included something that I heard in one of the groups, and they said where you get it is from breaking down your standards. So where we get our data first is that we just know our learning progressions, we create those learning intentions, and then we create those success criteria long before we ever get into the classroom. And so that's really where we get that data, is those rich conversations in our collaborative teams when we're discussing our essential standards. And then the types of data that you could get, what did you say? That the types of data that you could use? Heard them. CFAs and
You could do
observationals, absolutely. CFAs. And then your common summative assessment that's going to end. So, and where you get those, I heard, I think it was Charlotte's group who was talking about, you know, we could get them from School City, from HMH. There's a lot of different places where your collaborative teams can create those CFAs. All right, we are halfway there to our learning intentions, so we know where to get the data and the types. Now let's look about how to talk about the data. And this is something that we do in our collaborative teams. I kid you not, as we have these group roles. There's one of these group roles that I love to have. There's the other one that I just don't enjoy as much. She knows which one it is. And so we assign our collaborative team these group roles, because here's what we know. When a collaborative team has somebody, it helps facilitate and it helps enhance the group work. And so we'll have somebody that's our agenda driver, and they're the ones that are making sure that we're looking at that agenda and we're following it to the T. Because what Dr. Gilbert said earlier is at first when you have compliancy, then it becomes commitment. And at this point, some of our teams don't even have to look at that agenda anymore because it's just a natural process of who we are. The other one is the note taker. That's what I'm terrible at, but we assign somebody to make sure that they're taking the notes for the group. Then we have somebody that's a timekeeper, because that 45 minutes can get away with you like that. And our best timekeepers get out their phones and they literally hit the timer and hit 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and we follow the time. And then the last one is the encourager, because we all know that in our whirlwind of teaching life, we need some encouragement, especially on Friday afternoon when we're PLCing in those collaborative teams. So that's the first thing that we do when we're talking about our real-time data in our collaborative work. You all have this right here, so if you wouldn't mind turning to this page in your packet. So here's how we talk about that collaborative work. The first thing that we do is we look at big picture facts. So what I'm going to ask for you to please do is get out your phone with your calculator, and will you please go ahead, and I want you to summarize the big picture facts for this classroom. And when we summarize big picture facts, we're looking at the percentage of students that are highly proficient, proficient, partially proficient, and minimally proficient. And I will tell you there are 47 students in that class. So if you would go ahead and determine the level of proficiencies for each of those. Lindsay's like, got it. this class do? Where were we at with the number of kids that were highly proficient?
60%.
Everybody else get 60%? Okay, 60%, that's phenomenal. What about the kids that were proficient? What's the percentage there? 32%? And then the kids that were partially proficient? 2%? And then the kids that were minimally proficient? 6%. So what we're looking at overall is how did this class do? Jessica Tucker in a little bit is going to talk about the MTSS process and that what you're looking at with how many kids in your tier 1 should be passing at any one time. And Dr. Gilbert's going to discuss that as well. In the RTI books, it says that you should have at least 85% of your kids passing tier 1. And on our campus, we use 80%. So if we're thinking about this class right here on this CFA, how did they do with their tier 1? Did they get it or did they not? They absolutely did. They got it, and so that's what we're looking at. And Dr. Gilbert in a minute is going to show you how we actually graph that, so I'm not going to cover it, but at this point in our conversations, we'd be stopping and we'd be graphing. The next thing that we do when we're talking about data is we're looking at celebrations. Is there anything to celebrate with this class? Now, it's really hard when you don't know the kids, but what if I were to tell you that the teacher in blue is our EL teacher and our SPED teacher, and the teacher in red has our gifted cluster? What are your thoughts? Is there anything to celebrate? So looking at that, what are some of your celebrations? Because some of you in that would you rather did say you talk about other people's data.
I mean, it's a praise for the EL and the SPED kids because they're doing so well. Like you would anticipate it to be the other way around. And you would want to see like, okay, what did you do differently to compare it to what the gifted teacher was doing and learn from each other in that front.
Absolutely. Yeah. Gary?
I hope that the gifted teacher would focus on getting the kids that are highly proficient rather than just being proficient and push them further.
Gotcha. I'm wondering how many of those are bubble kids that were so close to being highly proficient. And looking at this class, I think she knows them better. But I do think all of the gifted students right now in that class are actually at HP. So, absolutely. So that's what we're going to do next is we look at those celebrations. Sometimes we're able to say another celebration is look at the kids who maybe moved. Because if this was our second CFA, we're going to be looking at Parker, Alex, and Jude next time. Are they staying at minimally proficient or are they moving? And if they're moving, we're going to consider that a win, a celebration. The next thing that we do is we look at data trends, and we actually, for 5 minutes, we're not allowed to talk. And for 5 minutes, what we're doing is we're answering those questions on your, so if you look at the agenda and their data talks, there are 4 questions that the teachers are pondering. And the first question that they're looking at is there any particular question that the students struggled with? Is there any commonalities there? Everybody find that section? It should be under your very first page, right here, under data trends, or under your back page. And so then we're looking at, okay, is there any types of errors that were common with those kiddos? And then we're looking at our kids that were proficient and highly proficient, and if there's any types of errors with those particular kids. And the teachers are analyzing their data, and we know that teachers are busy, crazy, so that's really just time for them just to kind of wind down and really look at those student samples and look at what's in front of them. After we're done with that, then we do have those conversations where we're talking about, okay, as a group, we come and we discuss those, and then we're talking about our effective tier 1. So now what I'd like for us to do is take some time. We've just covered question number 2 in the PLC process, and that is how will we know if our students have learned it? And so thinking about how will we know if our students have learned it, I'm going to go back to this one right here, and I'm going to take you to your agenda. Will you just take a minute on your note catcher to kind of reflect some of your new learning, or learning that kind of maybe says, you know what, we are on the right track with using real-time data to talk about how do we know if our students have learned it.